save money, ditch your cable bill forever, and get free TV for the rest of your life with TigerStream. With TigerStream, there's no monthly bills, and you get free TV. You get all your TV shows, all your movies, all your sports, all your news channels, all your music, everything that cable has, you get on TigerStream, but you don't have to pay the monthly bill. You buy the TigerStream box, and that's it. You get free TV for the rest of your life. And basically, it pays for itself because you're not having to use that money no more to pay for your bills, so it pays for itself through the money you save by not having a cable bill. So switch to TigerStream. You get all your movies, plus movies. You get TV shows, movies, sports channels, everything that a lot more that cable does not have. They sent me one in the mail, and they had TV shows from other countries, as well as sports and movies and so much more than what cable had to offer. And they even had movies that were still in theater. They had a lot of new releases as well. So watch all your popular TV shows, movies, sports on TigerStream, and if you miss a show, that's okay. They have instant replay. So with TigerStream, you save a lot of money, free TV for the rest of your life. There's a no question 30-day money-back guarantee, so you have 30 days to try it out. If you don't like it, you can send it back, but I know you will, so just give it a shot. They have other devices that do similar things, such as they have the Amazon Fire Stick and the Roku, but they don't offer nearly as much as the features, apps, and add-ons that TigerStream offers. Plus, TigerStream offers private streams to their customers, which eliminates buffering in high definition, which makes TigerStream better than Roku and better than Amazon Fire Stick. They don't have as many features as TigerStream does. So click the link in the description box, enter the promo code you see in the description box, get $50 off. This pays for itself because you no longer have a cable bill. There's no point in paying a cable bill when you can just get TigerStream and have free TV for the rest of your life. Support my sponsors. You support me, Fisher of Men.
Santa Barbara, California, 1980. Recreational scuba diver Rick McKeever goes missing near the sunken wreck of the Liberty ship Allen. A day later, his mangled gear is dredged up by a search team. His apparently violent cause of death is a mystery. Was it sharks? A boat propeller? Hans Ulbrich, who was his dive buddy that day, insists it was something far more terrifying.
What are we gonna do? Where is he?
When an abandoned industrial building is cleared for demolition, a locked door is discovered in its basement. The door conceals an archive of strange and disturbing specimens, recordings, photos, and documentary films. Compelling evidence of monstrous creatures and preternatural events. The documentarian's whereabouts remain unknown. In his records, he identifies himself only as the Teller. His investigations reveal a frightening world of dark secrets.
In 1998, I acquired a box of intriguing photographic negatives thought to be destroyed 18 years earlier. They tell a story involving lifelong friends Hans Ulbrich and Rick McKeever. They grew up together in southern New Jersey.
Rick and I, we fell in love with diving, in high school. We just magically started doing it. It was just, it was amazing.
They attend different colleges, but after graduation, they decide to put off careers and head for a West Coast adventure.
We'd gotten back together and decided that we were basically going to live our dream, our first real love of our lives, you know, which was diving. So I had mentioned to him, you know, that I'd heard about Santa Barbara, California. And he said, yeah, I heard about Santa Barbara, California as well. So we mutually decided, let's go be Mavericks, let's go do this. And we moved to Santa Barbara. We got a little place. This is just a tiny little, like, one-room shack with a couch, with a little souvenir shop in the marina there. We were hoping that we could get jobs, you know, on a commercial dive boat. But those jobs were just, you know, they were all taken.
They trade work as deckhands for dive time and live a party life in the California sunshine.
This gentleman walks in. He's kind of loud, he's dressed nice, and then he sits at the bar next to us and we start talking with him. And before you know it, you know, one thing led to another. He's buying us drinks and he's talking about us coming and hanging out with him all night. So we were like, great.
I tracked down Leonard Ryberg, the wealthy boat owner they met that night.
We were down at the marina. My regular crew and I would come back in, been out on the water on my 38-foot fishing boat, pretty nice little boat. And Rick and Hans kind of joined up with us, started having some cocktails. They were talking about how they wanted to go scuba diving. So I told them, I said, you know, we're going back out later tonight. You know, if you guys want to come party with us tonight, then, you know, I can put you in the water tomorrow morning. There's a couple of reefs down there. You know, Rick, you can dive. As long as you bring us up some lobsters for lunch, it's all good. I'm figuring, you know, hey, I got somebody to dive for lobsters for me.
It is on March 27th of 1980 that Olbrich and McKeever dive on the Ellen, a sunken wreck that had been there for years. All the locals knew about it. They had done it a half dozen times before, whenever they could con their way onto a boat for free. But this dive would be their last.
It's really early in the morning. I'm pretty heavily hungover. So I nudge Rick and I say, hey, it's time to do this. Let's go dive. Let's make this happen.
They put out to sea around 9 a.m. A half hour later, they are 90 feet above the wreck of the Ellen.
It really was a beautiful day. It was a gorgeous day. The visibility is about probably 30 to 60 feet. Maybe at times even better than that. So we're halfway down, we're feeling good, feeling better as we're heading down. We get to the bottom and we start searching for lobsters. We're very close together because, you know, being dive partners, you know, that's how we were taught, and we were, you know, basically within about 5 to 7 feet at all times. But we heard this strange, like, roar come out of nowhere.
Hans and Rick know the ocean is filled with incredible mystery and danger, but what they are about to witness is beyond imagination. After a night of partying in Santa Barbara Harbor, Hans Olbrich and Rick McKeever dive to a wreck 90 feet below to find lobster for lunch. But they are not alone.
I'm not sure where this roar came from, whether it was on the surface or was on the boat moving or shifting, or there was something on the ground or behind us. So I look at him, he's looking at me, and, you know, I'm thinking, like, don't panic, you know, we generally don't get scared because we've seen a lot, but this was really loud and it was really strange. So we look around, we can't see anything, and we continue on looking for lobsters for this guy. Within about, I would say, probably 30 seconds, we experienced like a thermal climb. And if you're not familiar with that, that's when, you know, the temperature of the water changes. But this was extreme. And Simultaneously to this happening, the water visibility started to go down a bit.
Suddenly, the two divers sense something behind them. McKeever turns and looks, and shows immediate signs of physical panic. Before Ulbrich can wheel around, something takes out McKeever.
Something just came out of nowhere violently. It brushed me as it came by, and it attacked Rick. It literally ripped him away from his position. And when it happened, it was so violent that the turbulence was like a wave. It was like a wave hitting me. And all of a sudden there was like just red around me. And I couldn't see Rick. And I'm starting to really freak out at this point. I'm looking around, I don't see him, all I see is red. I'm looking frantically for my friend, and he's nowhere to be found. Before I knew it, my heart was beating so loud it was just in my eardrums, just pounding away. That mixed with the current and the red water, I was literally panicked out of my mind, and I had to gather myself together, and I said, I gotta get out of here now, or I'm not gonna get out of here. I was freaking petrified. I managed to make it about 3/4 of the way up. Some kind of courage in me told me, look for Rick. Just take one last look. And he was nowhere to be found. There was nothing there.
So I'm walking around the boat looking for bubbles, hoping they're coming back up, and that's when I see Hans.
Ryder! What the hell's going on? We gotta go!
They help pull me up on the boat, and I'm kicking and screaming the whole time. And they're looking at me like, calm down, calm down.
And he says, we gotta get out of here, otherwise we're all gonna die. We didn't want to leave because we wanted to find. Hans had come up too quick, so he was gonna start getting sick from the bends, and I knew we had to get him back in. So I called the Coast Guard and told them that we had a diver down and where he was.
The radio chatter is intercepted by a young news photographer named Lee Van Asten. I convinced him to discuss this disturbing incident.
At that time, I was working as a freelance photographer for a local news station. I was listening to the radio scanner when I heard about an ongoing Coast Guard search for a shark attack victim. And I could hear there were several vessels out there looking for a victim. And then a call came across.
Coast Guard PB 219, I think we've got all we're gonna find. We're gonna go ahead and bring it in. We're still good monitoring. It doesn't look good. Looks probably like a boat propeller got him. Maybe a shark. No remains. No body.
Van Asten ascertains the vessel number and the location where it will be docking. Eager for a scoop, he rushes to the pier. He meets the boat crew as they are unloading and laying out the evidence for the coroner and police. The crew is clearly inexperienced with the press. Van Asten presents his credentials and is able to take unobstructed photos. There is nothing left of McKeever but trace evidence. His wetsuit is shredded, his regulator hose torn, and his tank severely scraped. It had all been found on the ocean floor about 100 yards from the hull of the Allen. Also discovered is a massive talon with a hunk of fleshy cuticle still attached. The claw measures 9 inches along the curve. The search and rescue team seems as in awe of it as the young photographer does.
I asked if it was a deformed shark tooth, and they didn't know. And even if it was still 9 inches long, and that would make this animal a total freak of nature.
I believe Hans Ulbricht's account, and now I've seen Van Esten's photographs. What was this creature? A new, undiscovered species? Or an ancient one? I'm not sure. A diver has been killed, and TV news photographer Lee Van Esten has captured evidence of a strange cause for this incident.
I immediately realized I had some once-in-a-lifetime pictures. And when I noticed that the police were coming, I just headed back straight to my car and got out of there. I went back to the darkroom to get those films developed for the 11 p.m. news. Then at 7:30, some guy in a suit showed up at the news station looking to talk to the manager. But they left with the films, any pictures I was able to develop, as well as the negatives.
Despite having gathered information on what appears to be a compelling story, the station doesn't run anything on it at 11. They do report on it the next day, but the incident is described as a boating mishap, with no emphasis on the massive violence McKeever suffered. The news station and the search team refuse to answer any further questions about it. As the weeks go by, a traumatized Hans Ulbricht falls into a deep depression.
It was really starting to get to me. I mean, I couldn't even make my best friend's funeral. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. I had no desire to dive. I mean, I had lost what felt like my lust for life, along with my best friend, and just a horrifying memory of that day. The way the newspapers reported the story was just a complete sham. I mean, they got it so wrong. I mean, they called it a boating accident. I mean, this was not a boating accident. This was something much more. I started to feel obligated to get the truth to the surface.
Ulbricht seeks out a reporter from the Santa Barbara Herald-Leader, a small local paper. It's a fairly reputable publication and known to be a little more aggressive about the stories it would get behind.
You know, I almost felt like I was being mocked, honestly, when the guy had first come up, because he was young. I noticed something different about this reporter. He actually looked like he was listening to me. And he was writing stuff down. He wasn't dismissing me. This guy was believing me. For the first time since the incident, or whatever you would call it, I had somebody to believe my story. I get a phone call out of the blue one night. I pick up the phone. There's a strange voice on the other end of the line. I can't place this voice, but it doesn't sound good. This guy tells me, listen, you need to shut your mouth. And I'm frozen. Normally I would tell somebody like this to go to hell. And he starts mentioning my family's names, their full names, and their addresses. Nobody knows about my family. Nobody knows anything about, where we're from. So I'm quite taken aback, and I'm scared at this point. He tells me I need to shut my mouth, get all of my together, and get the hell out of town. Now. At that point, I decide this is real, and something really big is happening here that's bigger than you. Next morning I get up, I pack up everything I have, I put it in my car, and I roll out of Santa Barbara, content to leave the whole damn thing behind me. I, at this point, for the first time, am comfortable to speak about it again.
Ulbricht's leaving town may have been motivated by more than fear. Neighbors say he departed in a new car, which he never could have afforded given the financial hardships he describes. California motor vehicle records show that he indeed owned it. Where did that money come from? The oceanside town of Santa Barbara, California, has been shaken by the disturbing death of young diver Rick McKeever. Just when it appears that the whole matter is going to blow over, a man's disappearance and presumed death, evidence of a cryptozoological creature, and what is clearly a cover-up, a shuttle boat sinks while departing the deep drilling rig Blue Thalassa 6 miles off the Santa Barbara coast. The sinking is preceded by a short, harrowing distress call.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Huguenot. We've just been rammed. Christ, requesting assistance.
There are no survivors. The Huguenot is a 40-foot vessel used to transport administrative personnel, documents, and small cargo to and from the platform. Robert Corso knows the boat well. He works on Blue Thalassa loading and unloading transports during the period in question.
Huguenot was some 3 miles out from the Blue Thalassa when he sent out distress signal that they'd been rammed.
Oddly, the area is immediately declared restricted, and civilian craft coming to help are waved off by the growing fleet of Navy and Coast Guard vessels.
The ship had been broken into a lot of pieces, which sort of confirmed the report that she'd been rammed. Although that's very, very deep water there. I can't imagine what they would have run into. The crew and everybody were lost. I think the next day, a human leg floated to the surface, but that was it. They never found anybody.
It seems too much of a coincidence that this occurrence is in the vicinity of Blue Thalassa drilling station. The state-of-the-art oil here earlier, and has technology to drill in waters 2 miles deep, the deepest in the world at this time. And the geologists on board found the drilling experience to be unusual.
We were wildcatting off the Channel Islands, drilling in about 1,500 feet of water. And then it was about a few thousand feet of sediment at that. And what happened was we found this very rare pocket of Silurian limestone. And Silurian, that period of time is like 430 million years ago. And so it's really neat to find these because they do end up being really huge caves. As we drill down through these layers, then with the Pacific coast and the plate set up being unstable anyway, it just, all these pressure vectors, if you will, created this collapse of the cavern.
In the days following the rupture in this cavern, crew members report hearing strange sounds at night, almost like a wail, but more aggressive, something akin to a grinding foghorn. Not long after, Rick McKeever meets his untimely end. The Navy knows there is something in the water. They briefly track a large sonar signature, having motion consistent with that of a sea creature. It's 45 feet in length. The Navy quickly releases 15 trained attack dolphins into the area.
Attack dolphins are mainly used to patrol, harbor areas looking for enemy divers. They're just like security guards, They just monitor the areas, looking for signs of trouble. They are armed with a snout-mounted hypodermic lance with a CO2 charge, which they're able to inject and just immediately blast right into a body. And when they do ram that into their victim, the embolizing effect, it's just gruesome and deadly.
Ostensibly, the dolphins identify their enemy from the scent provided by the detached talon found near McKeever's gear. No one knows how it all transpired in the depths of the ocean, but it must have been one hell of a battle. Of the original 15, only 9 dolphins return, all of which have discharged their weapons. The dolphins give the signal to their handlers that they have found and killed a target. Analysis of the claw eventually yields a best guess as to its origin. It is thought to come from a creature resembling a massive Montiel Tosuchus aruta composi, but with longer limbs and more agile claws. Its behavior also shows an uncanny intelligence. But for now, the waters would be quiet. Until, in late August of the same year, this 8mm film appears. It was shot in late spring by a Mexican fishing boat operating in the Gulf. The decayed mass in its nets appears to be the head and upper torso of a huge creature. Its single remaining forelimb dangles, showing massive claws similar to the one recovered in the McKeever incident. Contained in the fleshy mass are 2 leathery eggs the size of human heads.
Go to Blanding, Utah, you'll see carvings of dinosaurs on the cliff there. Apparently they knew about dinosaurs in Utah. The Indians knew about them. They killed them, apparently. This is a cave painting in Australia showing a guy running away from what appears to be a dinosaur. I can't pronounce the name of this place in Canada, Mishap something or other here, but it looks like these Indians have painted something on the cliff there that appears to be like a dinosaur, with a dermal frill ridged on its back. This is a painting from Australia. These guys are all dancing around what quite obviously looks like a dinosaur. Apparently they're upset because it ate their friend. Okay, there's the friend inside. You know, give him back, please, right now. Anyway, this guy says nobody's ever seen a dinosaur. Well, why did they put them on their cave paintings? Why did they put them on ancient pottery? Why do we see so many legends of dragons if nobody's ever seen one? Down in Peru, they've got the driest desert in the world. It's only rained twice in 400 years, is my understanding. When the Spanish came across there in 1500s, they found white lines on the desert. They were obviously man-made. Somebody piled up the rocks. There's a pile of white rocks that goes sometimes for miles, straight as an arrow. These today are called the Nazca lines. How many of you have ever heard of the Nazca images? They got all these images down there and down in Peru. You can study that if you'd like. But strange, these images are interesting. But one of them shows a spider which has no eyes and one leg is longer than the rest. And for centuries, everybody thought, well, these were poor, ignorant, stupid people. You know, they forgot to put the eyes on, and they made the one leg longer by accident. Recently, there was a spider discovered in the Amazon jungle 1,000 miles away. It only lives in caves. It is extremely rare. It's supposed to be one of the rarest spiders on Earth. It's an 1/8 of an inch long, little tiny spider, lives 1,000 miles away in the dark, in the caves. The spider has no eyes, and during mating season, that one particular leg grows longer, and it exchanges DNA off the tip of that leg for 15 seconds. How did they know that in Peru, 1,000 miles away? Maybe they weren't so stupid after all. Anyway, in 1535, the Spanish conquistadors came through that area, and they found stones with strange animals on them. They sent some back to the King of Spain and said, what on earth are these animals carved on these rocks? The king said, I have no clue. Today they're called the Ica burial stones from Ica, Peru. Dennis Swift is probably the world's expert on those. He's one of my good friends from Portland, Oregon. He did a great session at our boot camp in 2005, our creation boot camp we have in Pensacola, Florida. And we've got his DVDs of him speaking on the Ica stones. Oh, it's incredible. You can still get those on our website. But these stones show dinosaurs on them. The Nazca burial stones from about the time of Christ, plus or minus a few hundred years. Some of them show brain surgery. They find brain surgery instruments, hardened copper, tempered copper instruments for cutting into people's heads, apparently. Some of them show heart surgery, limb reattachment, steam engine. One of them showed what looks like a steam engine. Strange things are found on these Ica stones in Peru, but quite a few of them, over 500 I believe, show dinosaurs. Why would they have dinosaurs and humans on the same stones? Well, because people lived with dinosaurs. Anyway, there's plenty on that. Here's one from our museum. Shows a dinosaur holding a guy by the head. This one we've got shows what appears to be a guy cutting the head off the dragon because the dragon killed his friend. You can see the friend's body is inside, but his head's missing. So his buddy's just doing what the Bible says. You know, vengeance is fine, saith the Lord. Something like that. But this guy's jabbing one through the throat with a spear. This one's hard to see, but he's shoving the spear down the dragon's throat. This one, the dragon's got the guy by the arm, and apparently his spirit is leaving. He's flying off into heaven, or wherever they go when they die in their culture, you know. This guy's got the knife stuck in the dragon's head, and the dragon's biting the guy. We've got 8 of these stones in Pensacola, Florida. It's the largest collection in America, I believe, at $1,500 each. You know, not too many people have these things, but some of them show circles on the side. Now, that's kind of interesting. Why would they put circles on the side of the dinosaurs? Well, nobody ever found dinosaur skin until about 20 years ago, when fossilized dinosaur skin was found. It's very interesting. The dinosaur skin has circle patterns on it. They had to see a live one to know to put that on the stones, because you couldn't tell that from the bones. We got some dinosaur skin in our museum in Pensacola. Recently, they just found unfossilized soft dinosaur tissue. Soft dinosaur tissue? So now the brilliant scientists are trying to figure out, how could tissue stay soft for 70 million years? The thought will never cross their brain to question that maybe it's not 70 million years old. I mean, that thought will never enter their head, okay? This guy's cutting the head off a dragon. There's a guy riding one. We got a ton of information on dinosaurs living with man. Sometimes they're in friendly gestures, like this one's petting him. He's got his head laying on his shoulder, okay? Pottery was found with dinosaurs on it. A mummy was found in a tomb wrapped in a blanket, and all around the blanket were dinosaurs. Why would they put dinosaurs on their blankets? Why would they put them on their pottery? Why would they carve them on cliff walls? Why would they put them on their waistbands? In Acámbaro, Mexico, 56,000 ceramic figurines of dinosaurs were found. They knew about them in central Mexico. They have always lived with man. They did not live millions of years ago. But everybody today is saying dinosaurs lived millions of years ago. Nobody's ever seen one. Yeah, I think they have, okay. An Italian peasant killed a dragon that was bothering his cows. They had it stuffed and mounted for a museum display in 1572. By the way, you know why so many Italians are named Tony? Years ago, they were shipping them to America, and they stamped on their forehead, to New York. Just a little bit of trivia there. But the Sutton artifact appears to show what it looks like a pterodactyl with its wings folded up. This lady sent me this picture of the dragon found in Utah. Said, Brother Hovind, looks like a dinosaur to me, carved on the cliff up here. Roman artifacts were found in Tucson, Arizona. By the way, the Romans came across the ocean way before Columbus did. Columbus was not the first white man across the ocean. There was trade back and forth for centuries until the Catholic Church kind of had the Dark Ages come in and shut down knowledge and information. But Brendan the Navigator came across in 500 A.D. Roman coins, or Hebrew coins, were found in Ohio in a burial mound. There was trade back and forth at the time of Christ across the ocean. But in a Las Lunas Decalogue stone here found in New Mexico, there's an 80-ton stone showing the 10 Commandments in Byzantine, which was only used about 500 A.D. is my understanding. Somebody came across, tried to evangelize America, made it as far as New Mexico 1,500 years ago. But one of these Roman swords shows what quite obviously appears to be a dinosaur on it. How on earth could they get dinosaurs on their swords at the time of the Roman Empire? During the age of sailing ships, there are thousands of legends of people sighting sea monsters. Well, if you're in a sailboat, it's kind of quiet going through the water, okay? With a diesel engine, they can hear you coming 50 miles away underwater. Of course, you're not going to see one, all right? But there are legends all over of dragons living with man. I think we've really been lied to. We could spend a long time on dragon legends. I read prolifically on that topic about dragon sightings down through history. Just get our video number 3 if you want more on dragon legends. Did you know there are actually stories of giant octopus living in the ocean? I mean, like really, really, really big octopus. One octopus washed up on the beach in Florida. It was 200 feet across and weighed 5 tons. That's a big octopus. A whale was killed near Seattle. Inside the whale's stomach was one arm to an octopus that was 150 feet long. Whales love to eat octopus. And if a whale eats too much octopus, he'll get sick and puke it back up. And if you ever see a piece of puked up octopus floating around in the ocean, be sure to grab it. It's worth a fortune. Does anybody know what they make out of puked up octopus? Perfume. That is correct. That explains a few things, doesn't it, fellas? Hey, dear, you smell like a puked up octopus. Yeah, and you can sleep on the couch for a month, too. Yeah. There are giant squids found out there in the ocean. I mean, really big squids. We could spend a long time about that one. A giant squid washed up on the beach in New Zealand. They said it was a baby. Full grown, it would have been 150 feet long. People say, no, wait, Hovind. If there are dinosaurs mentioned all through history, are dinosaurs mentioned in the Bible? Oh, yeah. Dinosaurs in the Bible? Yeah, we're going to cover that in the next session. Dinosaurs not only mentioned in the Bible, some dinosaurs might still be alive. We'll cover that.
On April the 25th at about 10:30, we noticed something big caught in the nets. It was a red, fleshy object which smelled very strongly. We didn't know what it was, so I went for my camera and flash gun.
Sadly, the body itself was afterwards thrown back. But early in 1980, one of the world's leading fisheries experts, Professor Fujio Yasuda, arrived for a conference in London with all the remaining evidence.
This is all the evidence about the unknown creature dredged from the sea by the Surumaru off New Zealand on the 25th of April 1977. These photographs were taken by Mr. Yano of Taiyo Fisheries. The real half of the body was rotten and dropped off. As you can see in this photograph, the surface of the body is covered with a fat-like substance. This is the drawing made by Mr. Yano after measuring the creature. I can't think of any known fish which has this shape. I can't tell what this creature is, but I assure you that it is completely unknown to us.
But Seymour Gimlin and
founder and director of the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. The title to today's program is, Did You See That? Exclamation point. We're going to talk about that which would shock our modern generation, but that which is not only biblical, but scientifically credible, and we're going to prove it on the program today. Man and dinosaur living contemporaneously. Men saw living dinosaurs. Dinosaurs saw living men. We have an incredible array of information today, and I have a very special guest. When I have Dr. Dennis Swift on the program, the ratings go sky high. I don't know how people know he's going to be on or is on, but worldwide, people like what he has to say. This gentleman is intrepid. He's fearless. He goes into jungles that are forbidden. He goes to lofty mountain peaks, deserts where the snakes and the vipers can destroy your life in a matter of minutes. Spiders can destroy your life in a matter of minutes. Yet he goes because he's driven by the truth. He is, in my opinion, the leading cryptozoologist alive today. And as a cryptozoologist, he's written an amazing book, Secrets of the Inca Stones, and much of what we're going to talk about today is pictured here. But we're going to solve some amazing problems, and he's the man who leads the field in doing it. I want you to meet my dear friend, Dr. Dennis Swift. Dennis, it's a pleasure to have you on the telecast.
Thank you, Carl. You're just a treat and a joy and a good friend that I've known for a number of years. Well, and it's wonderful to be a guest on your program.
Well, we need to stand together, you know.
That's right.
What you're going to say on the program today is not believed by standard academics. And many theologians have fallen prey to the wiles of the theory of evolution that man and dinosaur were separated by 65 million years. But you have information that recent civilizations, not only the biblical record of the book of Job with Behemoth in chapter 40, but recent civilizations outside the Bible with no influence of the Bible whatsoever have recorded living dinosaurs. Is that correct?
That's correct. I've been involved with a group of scientists, a team of over 100 scientists in 71 different countries, and there's been documented over 4 million plus petroglyphs. Petroglyphs are rock art carvings.
Yes.
And pictographs are rock art paintings. And among these petroglyphs and pictographs by various civilizations in America, the American Southwest, the Anasazi, the Harnada Indians, South American Indians, Mongolian people, in every place we've been, we find evidence that they saw living dinosaurs because they depicted them in their art.
Yes. So 4 million
plus
of these
petroglyphs.
Yes. And among those are examples of dinosaurs unmistakable. Would you take us through this information?
Yes, I'd love to do it.
ready. This audience is ready.
First, I'll take you to the American Southwest. There was a group of Indians called the Harnada Mogollon Indians who inhabited the American Southwest from 1000 to 1400 AD. And this petroglyph site in the New Mexico area of 24,000 plus petroglyphs just in one area, 1.5 miles by about a half a mile wide. And among the animals, deer, sheep,
that which we could identify.
Fish, they depicted in the basalt a Parasaurolophus dinosaur. And this dinosaur, you can see it here on the boulder.
I love that. He's one of my favorite. I call him the imperial dinosaur with the crest, the imperial crest.
He has the flamboyant head crest similar to a snorkel. It has the eyes depicted correctly, what we know of modern paleontology. And this is somewhere between 1000 and 1400 AD, this Parasaurolophus dinosaur. And it had stripes on it down the tail. And there is the evidence. You know, evolutionists say if dinosaurs and man lived together, evolution would be DOA, dead on arrival. That evolution would melt down faster than the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz.
Literally?
That it would be kaput. It would be finished.
Leading evolutionary scholars have admitted that.
Yes, leading ones like Louis Jacobs, Ernst Mayr at Harvard. They've all said if there's any evidence that dinosaurs and man were contemporaries or co-occurred together, evolution is false. And they attack this particular petroglyph because they said, oh, Dennis Swift and other creationists are well-meaning, but they're ignorant because no dinosaur had stripes like a zebra. You should leave the research to us dinosaur experts. And then recently, just on 2 weeks ago, a book was published, the discovery of a hadrosaur dinosaur in the Badlands of Montana. It is the most well-preserved dinosaur ever found. Over 90+% of the skin, fossilized skin, the internal stomach contents that had to form very fast, not millions of years, but very quickly. They cannot explain it. And what they discovered is they looked at this in the skin fragments, and they took this 29-foot specimen in 2 different blocks to the largest CScan machine in the world in Los Angeles, owned by Boeing. They put it inside the CScan machine, and when they came out, they discovered that there was crossing, starting with the tail, are stripes, like a zebra.
Like a zebra. Dennis, let's add a
all
little...
the way down the body, they think now that this had zebra stripes.
So that verifies the drawing of these particular Indians in the New Mexican Southwest. But let's add a dimension to this. I understand from reading some of the technical background of this incredible discovery by a young man who was a teenager and he's now working on his advanced degrees at Yale, I believe. The stripes are indicative of an additional dimension. The article goes on to say that current living reptiles that have stripes in this horizontal pattern are also able to change color to some degree. That being the case...
It may be like a chameleon. It could blend in with its environment.
What a marvelous specimen. and a marvelous discovery.
And what they could not understand about this is it doesn't fit with evolutionary theory because it's wrong. The fact is that the stomach contents were liquefied and then fossilized very rapidly, and they found it 44 different plants that had been eating, but the skin on the outside was not attacked by bacteria. They can't explain why the stomach contents was attacked by bacteria, not the outside, and it was remarkably preserved. Not millions of years, but very quickly.
Very, very quickly. And this demonstrates that the dinosaur was not a brute beast of the past as he is normally portrayed in the evolutionary scenario, but instead a very complicated reptile matching all the rest of creation.
And in approximately 200,000 plus petroglyphs, there's another one of these that they also did deep in a canyon that I know of. So they did see living dinosaurs. Now this is the same culture group, the Hornata, and there's a Comosaurus dinosaur on basaltic rock from about 1000 to 1400 AD. You can tell, slightly faded, but you can see the tail, the body, the head,
and the reptilian form. Yes.
Now, there's a very famous gentleman that I will not name his name publicly until the articles are published. He's a scientist in America. He read my book, The Secret of the Ecostones and the Nazca Lines, but he himself, in petroglyph research with his laboratory, they came upon a site where they themselves saw a dinosaur petroglyph next to what he was documenting. And in his mind, he said, dinosaurs, somebody get a pickaxe and chop this thing out. It's going to discredit my research. And then he said, wait a minute. Same patina, same everything. It was a intellectual cataclysm because he said, wow, dinosaurs and man must have lived together. And it turned his intellectual world upside down.
And more are experiencing that than will admit it.
These Indians fished there 1,000 years ago. There used to be many rivers coming together, and there was a volcanic explosion, and the rivers aren't there anymore in the desert. And they, as they were fishing, they go up on this hillside and carve these out of the rocks. One of the species that they carved of fish is a rare fish that was supposed to be extinct 210 to 420 million years ago, that defies evolutionary theory because they had to see it to draw it.
Yes.
It's a strange looking fish. Similar to what happened in 1937, all evolutionists and people said that the coelacanth was proof positive of evolution. And then in 1938, they found the living one off of Madagascar.
Yes, and many more have been discovered since then.
I have documented. This is a Mochi gold death burial mask.
I've seen the original of that mask.
Yes, we were together over to the museum that I took you there to in Peru, and the Mochi people who had inhabited the northern coast of Peru in a desert area from 60 AD to about 800 AD, they put 2 dinosaurs on this death burial mask.
Let's let the audience see. Here is the large head of the dinosaur with his barren teeth. There's the body. There are the frills over the spine and the long tail. Same on the other side, a mirror image.
And the Mochi people, among others, I have seen 11 Mochi vases out of about 50,000 that have the dinosaur on it, the same species of dinosaur with dermal spines running down the back. Dermal spines were unknown until 1992.
Correct.
When Stephen Zirkus, in his article in Geology, documented that they have dermal spines like an iguana, frills that run along the back. All the other paleontology books were wrong. And now, in the last few years, they're putting them with the dermal frills. These people had to, again, see living, breathing dinosaurs to drill them accurately.
Absolutely, no question about it.
And here I show a mummy from the Atacama Desert region. And now there is the driest place on the planet. See how well preserved those fabrics are?
Yes.
And they, on these fabrics, on the mummy, here's what they found. I want to point to something that is simply astonishing. It's a pedestal smashing blow to evolution. Here is a child's Nazcan poncho.
It's beautiful.
It's 400 to 700 AD. You know, once they sealed the tombs, the ancient people in that dry climate, it preserved it.
Certainly, I've been there.
This was found on a mummy, and there are the dinosaurs along the fringe.
No question about it.
The same dinosaurs depicted similar to on the mask,
yes,
similar to the vases. There is proof positive. These dinosaurs are missionary lizards. Everybody's curious about dinosaurs, and even this child's poncho, he has a dinosaurs on the bottom.
So they were relatively common.
Yes,
in that
1,300 years ago. Now, everything else on this table is real, but this is a replica of one of the mochi vases. And we see again the stripes.
Yes. Very
which I was heavily criticized for, but we now see the dermal spines and the frill on the back of the head.
Yes.
And this one looked like it had some kind of spikes on the end of the tail.
And
in the same Atacama Desert region, there was a people called the Paracas people, and they were from 300 to 500 BC. This was found in an official archaeological excavation wrapped around a mummy. This is 300 to 500 BC, and what you see are Allosaur or T-Rex type dinosaurs.
Incredible. But there's no question about it.
No question. No pre-Columbian authority, no skeptic, no evolutionist, no critic can deny that this is a real piece of cloth from a mummy with dinosaurs on it.
So I have to say again, did you see that?
Wow, I just did. I'm so excited I'll say it backwards. Wow, I'll say it backwards. Wow. Here is a stone from a Paracas tomb engraved with the same dinosaur.
Correct.
300 to 500 BC. We moved to the Noscan people group who were from about 300 BC to 800 or 900 AD. Here's a Noscan ceremonial vase with a dinosaur.
Yes.
The dinosaur has the dermal frills, 4 toes on side. This is 400 to 700 AD. The head and everything is similar to the Inca stones and other things that have been found there. And you know, the chronicler to the Incas, Juan de Santa Cruz Yamque Paracute, in 1571, he documented these stones and gravestones with what they call dragons on them, which we know are dinosaurs today. I want to show you now another civilization from the same region. This is Tiwanaku. This is about 500 AD near Lake Titicaca.
That's marvelous.
Here is a vase that any pre-Columbian authority is going to say, yes, that is Tiwanaku, 500 AD. See the dinosaur?
No question about it.
Now, 400 and something miles away is a mummy from, this was wrapped around a mummy. It's a swatch mantelpiece. Hold this at the end. This is actually 400 to 700 AD. You will see dinosaurs.
Absolutely stupid.
And this piece is 1,300 to 1,700 years old, and it's the same similar dinosaur depicted.
Motif. They had to see
it. It's not some mythological monster. And then we have another rare piece right here, a Noscan with the same dinosaur.
Absolutely.
This is approximately 200 AD. So
they had to see these creatures continuously in order to so faithfully represent them.
Yes. And what we see is the Nazca line. This is all the same region.
Yes.
We have stones, we have fabrics, we have vases with dinosaurs. These are the Nazcan geoglyphs, the Nazca lines, Nazca pulpa, that you can only see from the air. And these animals were done about 300 to 200 BC. And among them are the gigantic geoglyphs carved by the ancient Nazcan people. There is a Pachycephalosaurus dinosaur about 60 meters long. You can see the dinosaur Pachycephalosaurus.
And I personally saw that geoglyph as we flew over the area. You led the pilot.
And we have 200 miles away, and there will be another Nazcan glyph here, but this 200 miles away is a place called Toro Morto. And the Wari Indians, about 1000 AD, same geographical region, they did petroglyphs, rock art carvings with dinosaurs. Similar to Brachiosaurus dinosaur, Triceratops dinosaurs, they did it on the rock 1,000 years ago.
And what is intriguing to me is, on these dinosaurs, you see the rosette patterns.
The rosette patterns. The same on the petroglyphs that we see on the Ica stones and other engraved stones. Overflying the Nazca Lines again is this famous discovery recently that we flew over of a Triceratops species of dinosaur. Now, this geoglyph, we're flying about 2,000 feet, and we have to keep circling. But you will see here distinctively the head crest. This is a stone that was found nearby from the same period of time with the Triceratops species of dinosaur on it. The horns, everything. And this one's about 50 meters long, half the length of a football field.
I was amazed when I saw it.
And we flew over that. It was simply amazing, astonishing, incredible. And then we see the species again, larger blow up. Now, we go to Israel. And there in Israel, on the Golan Heights, this synagogue is Jewish. It was inhabited from 400 to 749 AD, where there was a major earthquake. They started excavating in 2003. El Kanatar, it means mother of arches.
Yes.
And as they were excavating, and let me emphasize, this was an official archaeological excavation by well-known archaeologists. And as they were digging down in the rubble, they found the synagogue, prayer room, stuff like that. They found pillars. At the base of one of these pillars, this pillar here, at the base, they found a dinosaur chasing a horse.
Is incredible. And not only chasing a horse, one is approaching.
And the other one bites the horse on the neck.
Yes.
This is no later than 749 AD. Somewhere between 400 and 700 AD, they carved this on the pillar. And you see the crest of the top of the dinosaur. Similar to a T-Rex, but this crest, only one species of dinosaur had this crest. And that's Cryolophosaurus.
Yes.
And Cryolophosaurus was found in the Antarctica. Has what they call an Elvosaurus too, like a pompadour crest on the top of the head. And it means frozen crested lizard. We see the crest on it.
Isn't that marvelous?
This is a stunning rebuttal to evolution.
Absolutely.
That means evolution is bankrupt. That means it never occurred. This is bringing to light in a Jewish synagogue not only the tombs of Peru, not only other places that we've witnessed the vases and everything else, but we see the 3 toes and the hind claw, and we see also, Carl, if we look closely, you can see his arms.
Yes, his forearms.
Forearms are right here.
Smaller forearms.
And he's reaching over the horse and biting into the horse.
I want to make this point as well. Not only is he biting the horse, but according to the theory of evolution, this T-Rex died out 64 million years ago. He was a
Give a day or two, yeah.
Yes, he was a brute beast. However, what we find here is a reflectivity in all modern animals of prey, and that is to go for the jugular vein area of the neck in one form or another, the top or the bottom.
Yes.
And here he's not going for the rump, as you would expect, you know, if he were a brute beast, but instead, jugular vein concept from the top, and of course the horse is being overcome, as we would expect.
And the people who discovered Cryolophosaurus, here's the reconstruction of the skeleton with the head crest, and they did a size comparison with an elephant. So when you look at a horse or anything, it's very comparable. This can only be a dinosaur. And there again is an artist's rendering of it from the Antarctica.
Had to be seen in living profile. Then, in the last moments, describe, if you will, what is found here at Zipori in this beautiful
is in Israel,
relief.
it's Zipori. It's inside of a Roman mansion. It is a mosaic floor with a Triceratops species of dinosaur. Give us a name, Carl, of this dinosaur.
It's a Ceratosaurus dinosaur in the family with Triceratops. The cerids are those that had horns.
Yes. And I have, this all tests to us that evolution is bankrupt.
That's correct.
I have one presentation I'd like to make to Creation Evidence Museum. And
well, I'm interested in that. You've arrived from many parts of the world, and with dealing with private individuals here in the United States, have amassed incredible artifacts.
Yes.
Tell me what you have in these closing moments.
Well, The Incas, people are familiar with Machu Picchu, the splinterous city, the last city up in the Andes, and the Inca Empire and the fall of the Inca Empire, Pizarro coming down and conquering them. But the Incas were a very advanced civilization from about 1000 to 1550 AD. And they had a system, not of written language, but they kept their entire history of their civilization on quipus.
Do you know how, is this original?
These two are original quipus. There's only a few of these in the entire world.
Yes.
We know from the chronicler to the Incas that these people, the Incas, their whole history of the civilization, the different colors was their religion, maybe binary code. We do not know how to decipher everything, but we do know that they also, with the knots, they knew in a whole province area. You know, their empire stretched for about 2,600 miles from Ecuador to the bottom of Argentina. And among these knots, these counts, they know when they came to a place in that village or the province area, how many sheep, how much grain they had, how many llamas they had, how many goods of different types they had in that place. And this was all inscribed on this, and the different colors and everything. This is one of the quipus that went round, and they also, the Chotskis, the Inca runners, who could deliver fresh fish 170 miles away from the coast all the way to the top of Cusco by runners, and they would run 5-10 miles at a time. And they carried these to messages from people on these knotted string instruments. And this stretches around.
Oh,
this is a price.
Wonderful.
This is totally
priceless.
Both of these, and they date. They're at least 1,000 years old.
Oh, that's wonderful. Oh, Dennis, these chronicle,
and these go to your museum.
Oh, that
Creation
is,
Evidence Museum.
Thank you so very much.
Sure.
I'll have to say, did you see that?
Wow,
that's wonderful. Here we have an expert cryptozoologist describing for us what has occurred in the past and evidenced in the present that man and dinosaur lived contemporaneously. Now, here we have a present to the Creation Evidence Museum from private collections through Dr. Swift, and this present will be placed in our permanent facility with honor and appreciation. This chronicles a people. Now we come to you. There's a record that God placed of great interest in your life, and every person that ever lived is in the scope of God's compassion. There's a book that chronicles the past history of man, all the pertinent details to tell us about us. It's been said that the Bible could not have been written by man simply without the inspiration of God, because man would not have told all of his foibles and his sins and the destructive nature. But the Bible describes that in the Chronicles that God wants us to know about. And in those Chronicles from the Word of God, we have the chronicle of God visiting planet Earth. After creating the entire universe, planet Earth, man, woman, then we have the chronicle detailing our sinful nature and our fall into sin. And then the love of God expressed in that God Himself, in the person of Jesus Christ, came to live among us, went to Calvary, died for our sins, was buried, rose again, and lives right now knocking at your heart's door. Would you let Him in? You've seen evidence that parallels the biblical record. Now you see evidence that God loves you. Would you pray this simple prayer? Just pray it with me from your heart right now. Would you pray, Dear God, I'm a sinner. Thank you for sending Jesus to die for me. Lord Jesus, I want you to cover me with your blood. Right now, forgive my sins. Step into my heart and live, and I'll serve you with all my heart. If you prayed that prayer, God said that He forgave you, that you're a part of the family of God, and I want to say, welcome home.
Once in a while I get people that that claim they don't believe in evolution. And my response generally is, why not? Really, why not?
You guys believe 20 billion years ago there was a Big Bang where nothing exploded and produced everything. 4.6 billion years ago the Earth cooled down, made a hard rocky crust. It rained on the rocks for millions of years, turned them into soup, and the soup came alive 3 billion years ago. Found somebody to marry, and something to eat, of course, and slowly evolved into everything we see today. There are some lies in our science books. Taught it for 15 years. Even though I'm not teaching it anymore, I still like to study. It's so many neat things to learn. We're going to cover some of that tonight. I'm not against science, I'm not against schools, I'm not against teachers, because most of them don't know what they believe. You have to tell them. They teach the kids it all started with a Big Bang 20 billion years ago. What exploded? This is what the textbooks teach.
Before the Big Bang, there was nothing, literally nothing, an infinitesimal nugget of space. And then something happened, triggering the most colossal explosion in history.
Yes, boys and girls, you see, nothing exploded, and here we are. So I asked this professor if I could ask him some questions about the Big Bang. I said, where did all this matter come from? He said, well, we don't know that for sure. I said, well, sir, would you please tell me where the laws came from? The universe is run by laws, gravity, centrifugal force, inertia. Who gave the laws? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could you tell me where the energy came from? You know, it takes energy to make a Big Bang. Who bought the gas to run this machine anyway? He said, we don't know that either. I said, sir, could I ask you another question? He said, sure. What else would you like to know? What else? What do you mean else? You haven't told me nothing yet. I said, does Berkeley have a merry-go-round? You see, if a spinning object breaks apart in a frictionless environment, the fragments will all spin the same direction. The professor said, yes, I understand about the conservation of angular momentum. I said, well, good. I'd like to ask you a question then, sir. If the whole universe began as a swirling dot, like you said, why do 2 planets spin backwards? He said, that's interesting. I said, no, that's more than interesting. It's kind of hard on your Big Bang theory. Not only that, 6 of the moons are spinning backwards. Why? He said, I don't know. Why do you think they're going backwards? I was hoping he was going to ask that. I said, okay, now, sir, hold it. If I told you that I believe God created the heaven and the earth like the Bible teaches, you're going to say, and where did God come from? And I don't know. But you said, well, we don't know that for sure. We don't know that either. Don't tell me my theory is religious and yours is science. Oh, no, sir, they're both religious. Evolution is a religion. You have to believe. So I asked the professor, where did the matter come from? He said, I don't know. So basically, I believe in the beginning God, and you believe in the beginning dirt. One professor was getting kind of upset about this time. He said, Mr. Hovind, there are hundreds of varieties of dogs in the world. He said, do you mean to tell me that you believe all these dogs came from 2 dogs off a Noah's Ark? You expect me to believe that? I said, sir, would you look at what you're teaching your students? You're teaching your students that all the dogs in the world came from a rock.
Charles Darwin was disciplined. I mean, he did these extraordinary experiments, this series of experiments.
Then they're going to tell the kids, well, we have evidence for this theory. Charlie Darwin stopped off at these islands right there called the Galapagos Islands. Charlie studied the birds very carefully and said, you know what? I think all these birds had a common ancestor. I bet you're right, Charlie. It was a bird. You see 14 kinds of birds, and you conclude that birds and bananas are related.
Here are these ancient dinosaur bones or fossils.
They tell the kids they have evidence of evolution from fossils. I don't think so. If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You don't know that it had any kids. And you sure don't know that it had different kids. You bring in a bone to the judge. Judge, I found this bone in the dirt. This is the ancestor of all the humans today. They would laugh at you. You don't know that that's the ancestor of anybody. And why on earth would you think a bone in the dirt can do something animals today cannot do? They'll say, boys and girls, you have 2 bones in your wrist, radius and ulna. And boys and girls, look at the whale's flipper carefully. Did you know the whale has 2 bones in his flipper? And they're called the radius and the ulna? Same as ours. Wow. Who named them, teacher? The whale? Think about it.
I'm here to tell my people it's time to stop believing bull just because of tell you bull with a straight look on their face. Evolution say people came from monkeys. And the question is, why is there still monkeys? Is these the retarded monkeys? They didn't turn into people just yet.
Even Stephen Gould admitted the absence of fossil evidence for intermediary stages is a persistent and nagging problem for evolution. See, what's happened, these guys have looked for missing links in the fossil record. They can't find any, and so they say, well, maybe evolution happened so fast it wasn't preserved. Maybe a reptile laid an egg and a bird hatched out. Well, who did that bird marry?
This process that brought us to be is billions of years old. It happens very fast, billions of years fast. Here is radioactivity.
We're going to tell the kids in the late 1940s they invented carbon dating. We're going to explain a little bit about radiometric dating and how it's supposed to work, and then show you that it does not work, okay? It sounds good, but there are some assumptions that mess everything up. If we had walked into a room and found a candle burning on the table, and I asked you the question, when was it lit? You say, I don't know, Mr. Hovind, it's burning when I got here. Okay, well then let's do some empirical science. Let's measure the height of the candle. Suppose the candle is 7 inches tall. Who can tell me when it was lit? Okay, nobody. Let's do some more empirical science. Let's measure the rate of burn. Suppose we determine it's burning an inch an hour. When was it lit? You're going to have a hard time telling me unless you're willing to make some assumptions. You find a fossil in the dirt, you can measure how much C14 is in it. Very accurately, by the way. And you can measure how fast it's decaying. That's just like measuring the height of your candle and how fast it's burning. Now, when did that animal die? You don't have a clue. Here's what you ought to consider about carbon dating. Samples of known age, it doesn't work. If it's a sample of unknown age, it is assumed to work.
It's just really a hard thing. It's really a hard thing. Your world just becomes fantastically complicated when you don't believe in evolution.
Freshly killed seal, carbon dated 1,300 years old. Shells from living snails, carbon dated 27,000 years old. Living penguins, carbon dated 8,000 years old. One part of Dima was 40,000 years old, another part was 26,000, and the wood next to it is 9,000. Then they tell the kids about the geologic column. They say each of the layers is a different age, you know, Cenozoic, Mesozoic, Paleozoic, Archeozoic, all them Zoic boys. Now, if you get a petrified tree standing up, running through different rock layers, I don't think it's smart to say those layers are vastly different ages. Those trees did not get slowly covered by the sediments over millions of years. They would rot and fall down.
Crazy.
They'll say, boys and girls, you have an appendix that you don't need anymore. That's a vestigial structure. That's proof of evolution. Well, excuse me, you do need your appendix. The appendix is part of your immune system. If your appendix is taken out, you can still live, okay, but it increases your susceptibility to quite a few diseases. You could live without both your legs and both your arms and both your eyes also. That doesn't prove you don't need them. There are no vestigial organs, and even if there were, that would be the opposite of evolution. That's losing, not gaining. I was taught when I went to school, man used to have a tail, but he lost it because he didn't need it. I thought, didn't need it? Have you ever thought how handy a tail would be? Have you ever come to the door with 2 sacks of groceries? Wouldn't that be nice, man, be able to grab that door and walk right around and get in it? Lost it because we didn't need it. Man, you could drive the car and tune the radio knob and hold the Coke at the same time.
What we're finding is that natural selection seems to be an incredibly important factor in generating new species.
Natural selection, the key evolutionary mechanism Darwin identified.
The bad designs get eaten by the good ones, and so all you have is good ones.
Why is there still monkeys?
Natural selection doesn't cause any evolution. It makes sure the bad ones don't survive, but it's not going to change it to something else.
That's what evolution is.
If you worked in a factory that produced cars, and your job was to check for defects, and you caught every single mistake, and you rejected it, how long would it take that process to change the car to an airplane? You say it'll never change it. That's my point. The students are taught we have evidence from development. Darwin considered this by far the strongest single class of evidence. This textbook says, the human embryo growing in the mother has gills like a fish. Those little folds of skin are not gills. Those little wrinkles under your chin when you're growing up later develop into bones in the ear and glands in the throat. They never have anything to do with breathing. I've seen folks that have 5 or 6 chins and they can't breathe through any of them but the top one. Those are not gill slits. Ernst Haeckel, though, said the turning point in his thinking was when he read Darwin's book. He made huge charts of his posters of his drawings of these embryos and traveled all over Germany and just about by himself converted the Germans to believing in evolution. Haeckel took a drawing of a dog and a human embryo and he changed them to make them look exactly alike. On top are Haeckel's fake drawings. Underneath are actual photographs of what he claimed he was drawing a picture of. Now either he's a lousy artist or he's a liar. Well, it turns out he's a liar. He was convicted of fraud by his own university, proven to be a fraud. But guess what? Haeckel's fake drawings are still used in textbooks in your state right now. It's only been proven wrong 125 years ago. I know it takes a while to get textbooks up to date, but that ought to be plenty of time. Adolf Hitler said, "You let me control the textbooks, I'll control the state." Watch this sentence here carefully. Some kid's doing this for homework tonight. Boys and girls, do you think humans are still evolving? Now, what kind of question is that? Doesn't that question assume that evolution has happened? What if a kid doesn't believe in evolution? How's he supposed to do his homework tonight? That question does not teach him how to think critically. That teaches him what to think, not how to think. And when the kid gets done with this course, he's going to think he knows how to think. But he doesn't. He knows how to be told what to think. Brainwashing at taxpayer expense. They want to use my tax dollars to teach that to your kids in our schools.
If you want to deny evolution, that's fine. But don't make your kids do it, because we need them.
And that's where the problem comes in. Okay? If you want to believe in the Big Bang, just enjoy yourself, but keep your religion at home. The Russian atheist astronomer came to America and spoke at one of the universities, and he said, started off his speech, he said, "Folks, either there is a God or there isn't. Both possibilities are frightening. If there is no God, we're in trouble. We're hurtling through space around the sun right now at 66,000 miles an hour, and nobody's in charge." That's a scary thought. But if God made the world, He owns it. That means He makes the rules. You see, if there is a God, we better find out who He is, and find out what He wants, and do what He says. Malcolm Muggeridge said, "I am convinced the theory of evolution, especially the extent to which it's been applied, will be one of the great jokes in the history books of the future." It's a joke. And it would be a joke if it weren't for the tragic results. How many kids are taught this thing every day and believe it, and it destroys their faith?
Find you something to believe in. Whole thing, who do you even pray to? Nobody.
Hey, if you died today, where would you go? You ought to think about it, because you will be dead for a long time. Doesn't matter how long you live, you're going to be dead longer than that. You know, George Washington died 200 years ago, and he's still dead. How much longer does he have to go? You're going to be dead for a long time. All you get in this life is a little bitty dash between two dates. Just a little, and it's gone. What are you going to do with your dash? Where would you go if you died? Now, if you're not sure you're going to heaven, you ought to give your heart to the Lord and get saved. Say, "Lord, you may have it," the whole thing. If you are saved, you ought to find something to do for the Lord. And you ought to quit worrying about getting a fancier car and a fancier house and start worrying about who's going to heaven or hell. Maybe God gave you that good job so you can give some money to missionaries, not so you can build a bigger, fancier house. God loves you. God has a plan for your life. And if you don't want it, well, that's your business. But the devil is laughing at you for believing in that. But God loves you, and He wants you to come to heaven. And if you'd like to find out how to go to heaven, come see me. I'll be glad to show you.
The Big Bang. Before the Big Bang, there was nothing. Literally nothing. Nothing created everything.
The Big Bang is an amazingly difficult thing to wrap your brain around, which isn't surprising.
13.7 billion years ago, we think it was tiny. Nothing. Literally nothing was tiny. And then something happened. Nothing created all the matter we see in the universe today. Nothing is more powerful than nothing. And that's what trips most of us up.
It was the explosion of
nothing.
Find you something to believe in. World getting crazy. And you better believe something.
The Bible mentions dragons quite a few times. 35 times, actually, dragons are mentioned in the Bible. That'd be a good quiz question. How many times are dragons mentioned in the Bible? You have to understand, the King James Version would not mention dinosaurs. Who can tell me why the King James Version would not mention dinosaurs? The name dinosaur hadn't been invented yet. King James Version translated in 1611, the word dinosaur made up in 1841. Obviously, they're not going to use a word that hasn't been invented yet. So they used the word dragons, which was used all through history. They're called dragons. And there are many books written about this, and literally thousands of legends of people talking about seeing dragons or killing dragons or somebody being killed by a dragon. The word dinosaur made up in 1841 by Richard Owen. Up until that time, they're known as dragons. Now, after the flood, you got 8 people. Everybody, you know, spreads out around the world in the next few hundred years. They have kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, and pretty soon you start to get a good-sized population. And they're spreading out, taking over new territory, you know, civilizing the world. However, whatever you think of that, that's what they did. As they spread out, the population begins to grow. Big, ferocious animals are going to be killed off. How many grizzly bears here in Escambia County, Pensacola, Florida, roam in the woods? None. Right. How many were there 500 years ago, you think? Probably lots of them. Well, what happened? When the more people move into an area, the more the big ferocious animals just aren't welcome. They're going to be driven off, or they're going to be killed off. If it came on the evening news tonight that there were 5 grizzly bears roaming around Pensacola, Florida, what would happen by 6 in the morning? Every redneck in the country would be out there with his rifle trying to shoot one, right? And whoever could shoot the biggest one would have his picture in the paper the next morning, holding it up by the tail. You know, I shot the grizzly bear and saved the village. Right? Now, nothing has changed. Okay? People are still the same. They were looking to kill these dragons for all these reasons, because they were a menace, to be a hero. If you go deer hunting at all? I ask the deer hunters, you know, those poor guys go out and try to shoot Bambi's daddy all the time. I say, if you're up in your tree stand and 5 bucks come running through the woods, you only have time to get off 1 shot. Which one are you going to shoot at? The largest one, the biggest one. Okay. Well, if you have this same mentality back 4,000 years ago and there's dragons out there to hunt, which one are you going to go for? The biggest one. Actually, they find now with satellite images, it's pretty interesting. I need to get a slide of this. There are, you know what a keyhole looks like? The old-fashioned keyhole, it's round on top and then 2 V's coming down like this. The old-fashioned skeleton key would go in a keyhole. Round circle with a triangle at the bottom. From satellites, they've noticed all over Europe and America, it appears to be thousands of years old, where somebody had built a giant keyhole shape, like a funnel that would, you could chase a bunch of animals. They'd hit this funnel and they'd end up in this circle, a corral. You chase them into this keyhole, bottom part of the keyhole, and you end up going in a circle. Only these things are 2 miles long. These keyholes, you can't even see them tear up in a satellite. You know, and you see they're picking these things out. A lot of research has been done on this topic by William Corliss at the Sourcebook Project, it's called. Fascinating stuff he has. Shows some of the pictures and drawings of these things. The theory is that people were using these to chase, you know, when they want to civilize an area, to take over a new area for, you know, build your city, they go in there and they chase all the dragons or whatever into this area using torches or, you know, something that makes noise or flames or something. And they end up trapped in here, and then you slaughter them because you surround them. You pen them in. Now they're easier to hunt, like shooting fish in a barrel. So I think after the flood, people are killing these dragons. And there are literally thousands of legends of people killing dragons. If you want to read some amazing stories, I'd recommend you read, like, for instance, the Gilgamesh epic about Gilgamesh who slew a dragon. We have a book that we offer here called The Great Dinosaur Mystery by Paul Taylor. Let's see, we're in our office now. The book is here someplace, but great book talking about dragons all through history. There's a Chinese legend. You were in China for a while, Jan? Chinese legend says a famous man named Yu, after the Great Flood, Yu surveyed the land of China and divided it into sections. He built channels to drain the water off into the sea and make the land livable again. Many snakes and dragons were driven from the marshlands. You're reading this Chinese story, and it's, you know, we got to build the channels to get rid of the water. You know, it's all swampy. We got to, you know, drain the land so we can build our cities. By the way, we had to drive out the dragons, and you know, just like it's normal, everybody has to do that. You know, nobody thought anything about it. This is from Wycliffe Bible Encyclopedia. This is the god Marduk. Now, the Babylonians had all sorts of gods. One of their gods was Marduk. Here's Marduk shown pictured sitting on top of a fire-breathing dragon. Notice the flame coming out of his mouth. Fire-breathing dragon. Now, there's lots of legends about dragons, but there are also an awful lot of legends about fire-breathing dragons. So where would this fit in? In the book of Isaiah, it talks about a fiery flying serpent. In the book of Job, it talks about, in Job chapter 41, it's got an entire chapter about an animal called Leviathan. And it says, out of his mouth go burning lamps and sparks of fire leap out. You might want to watch our videotape, the green one over there with the L on it, about Leviathan, the fire-breathing dragon. There really was a fire-breathing dragon. In Job 41, it says this, about this Leviathan, out of his nostrils goeth smoke. I've seen deacons do that at Southern Baptist churches between Sunday school and church. It says, out of a seething pot or cauldron, his breath kindleth coals, and a flame goeth out of his mouth. The Bible certainly teaches there was a fire-breathing dragon. There's certainly a lot of history about fire-breathing dragons. It is chemically possible to do that. And we've got an animal today called bombardier beetle that does a similar thing. It sprays out 2 chemicals and burns his enemies. They're here in Florida. They call them the blister bug, the bombardier beetle. We cover all that on video about Leviathan. Anyway, if you get a Catholic Bible, the Catholic Bible has 7 extra books, and a few of the books have extra chapters. For instance, the book of Daniel in our Bible has 12 chapters. In the book of Daniel in the Catholic Bible, it has 14 chapters. One is about Susanna, and chapter 13 is, and then chapter 14 is about the dragon. This chapter is known as Bel and the Dragon. Fascinating reading. Okay, I don't think it should be part of Scripture, but here's the way the story goes. Catholic Bible, Daniel 14:22. And there was a great dragon in the place, and the Babylonians worshipped him. And the king said to Daniel, behold, thou canst not say now that this is not a living God. Adore him, therefore. And Daniel said, I adore the Lord my God, for he is the living God, but that is no living God. But give me leave, O king. That's an old English phrase that means you give me permission. I will kill this dragon without sword or club. And the king said, I give thee leave. In other words, I'd like to see how you're going to do this. How would you kill this dragon without a sword or a club? Then Daniel took pitch and fat and hair and boiled them together and made lumps and put them into the dragon's mouth, and the dragon burst asunder. Very strange story. Here's the Hovind translation of what's going on. The Bible tells us in the book of Daniel chapter 1 that Daniel was one of those who was skillful in all wisdom and cunning in knowledge and understanding science. Well, I would assume that Daniel probably knew that nearly all animals like things that taste salty. You put a salt block out in the woods and the deer come up, the cows come up, everything comes to lick the salt. Daniel took pitch and fat and hair. Well, pitch is sticky, made from tree sap. You take pine tree sap and boil it down and make pitch. There were whole industries used to make pitch just to cover the ships back 200 years ago, before they discovered oil. First really commercial oil well was in Pennsylvania, Becky, in 1828, I believe. So before that time, they still had to make their ships waterproof, and they would use pitch, where they boil down the sap of these trees. Daniel took pitch, which is sticky, and fat, which tastes salty, and hair, which won't digest. You ever see a cat or a dog cough up when they get a hairball? You know, cough up this hairball. Hair won't digest. So Daniel took these 3, boiled them together, made lumps, gave them to the dragon, and the dragon burst asunder. Hovind translation is, Daniel tossed these things in the cage, the dragon ate them up because they tasted good. They wouldn't digest because of the hair. They stuck in his intestinal tract, and this was the ultimate case of dragon constipation, and the dragon burst asunder. Those were the days before Roto-Rooter. And so it blew him up. What a way to go, huh? But it's just an interesting story in the Catholic Bible about dragon. Yeah, they blow up. You feed them too much, they founder, right? Yeah. Saddam thinks he is Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated. The guy has a serious ego problem. He has huge pictures of himself all over the countryside. He has his picture in front of Nebuchadnezzar on their currency. He claims that he is Nebuchadnezzar reincarnated. Now his name is Saddam Hussein. Saddam means prince. George Bush always called him Saddam Hussein. You go back and listen to the newsreels, you know, George Bush always called him Saddam Hussein. Oh, this was done very intentionally. It wasn't that George Bush is stupid and didn't know, how to pronounce his name. The word Saddam is the Arabic word that means horse's rear end. So George Bush was intentionally calling him horse's rear end, Saddam Hussein. Interesting bit of trivia. Anyway, we'll take a break here in a second, but Saddam, in order to fulfill the image that he is Nebuchadnezzar, he has spent a fortune rebuilding the ancient city of Babylon. Babylon was destroyed about 600 BC by the Medes and the Persians, 586 or whenever it was. The Medes and the Persians came in there, destroyed Babylon, okay, wiped it out, burned the city, etc., etc. Took Daniel captive, and the book of Daniel is interesting because Daniel starts off in Israel. He's taken a slave, made a eunuch, takes him over to Babylon. He lives there for a while. Then they fall, and he goes into Media Persia and becomes, one of their high people there. By that time, he's, an old man, like 90 years old, and he still becomes one of the good guys. And that's when they throw him in the lion's den. He's like 90 years. You don't want to be thrown anywhere when you're 90. You certainly don't want to be thrown into a den of lions. I should say den of lions, not lion's den. Because a lion's den can be the place where they live, but nobody's there. A den of lions means they're there, right? He wasn't thrown into the lion's den. He was thrown into the den of lions, which in the Bible is very clear to spell that out in the King James Version. So, Saddam decided to rebuild the ancient city. It was destroyed about 600 BC. They've always known where it was. It was just ruins. The Middle East is full of those ruins, Egypt, about all they can do is point to their glorious past. Look at these big, huge buildings we used to have around here. Everything's destroyed now. But it sat desolate, destroyed for quite a while. Saddam decided to rebuild the old city. Well, most of the city walls had been preserved. It's a real sandy, desert area. The wind blew all the sand in and covered them up and preserved them. They're just buried in sand. So they excavated down, found the old walls of the city that were really well preserved. The brick was, and it contained hundreds of pictures of dragons on the sides of the city walls. Now look at this dragon. This one, they took the bricks apart and reassembled it back in Berlin. But however you pronounce the name of that museum. Strange animal. It has scales all over its body. See the scales on its neck and on its tail? On the feet, it has like claws. Now, and a forked tongue. That would indicate a reptile. And a horn on his head. All over these walls, and they've rebuilt the walls. In other words, they've rebuilt a whole section in a museum in Berlin. They have these pictures of dragons and lions. Apparently, in 600 BC, they really did have a dragon in captivity in Babylon. In the Catholic Bible chapter about this may be, based on historical fact that there were dragons still alive in 600 BC. Now, this had been 1,800 years since the flood. So probably the majority were dead, and it was a rare thing to have a dragon. Certainly be a rare thing to have a dragon in your castle. And, of course, Nebuchadnezzar and all of his superstition thought this was some kind of god because it obviously was a big, ferocious beast, and everybody should worship it. Of course, he built a big gold statue and said everybody should worship that, and he had a hard time worshiping stuff that he shouldn't have worshipped. So here we have an interesting story about dragons from 600 BC. Dinosaurs, I think, lived after the flood, becoming more rare, becoming smaller, less numerous, more rare, driven out of certain areas totally, extinct. Some species probably went extinct. By 300 BC, they were very rare. Alexander the Great, though, reported dragons when he conquered part of India. We'll take a little break. When we come back, we'll talk more about dragons that are mentioned through history, and then eventually lead up into dinosaurs that are still alive today, and dinosaurs that are mentioned in the Bible. We'll cover all that after the break. Okay, let's go through a few more reports from ancient history, 2,000 years ago or so, about dragons. Alexander the Great conquered part of India. As he was conquering the parts of the cities over there in this region, the people begged him not to kill the dragons that were sacred to them. And he said, what dragons? He said, outside the city in the caves, there are dragons, and we take sacrifices out to them. Alexander reported that, he said, I told him I wouldn't kill them, but I would like to see them. When he went out to see the dragons stuck their heads out and hissed at his soldiers. and scared them half to death. That's in, I don't know if it's in his diary or what, the records of Alexander the Great. This Roman mosaic, made out of small pieces of tile, you know, stuck together, was made about the 2nd century after Christ. It shows 2 long-necked dragons fighting. Or necking. Can't tell what's happening for sure. Man, that would be necking, wouldn't it? Anyway, how on earth would the Romans know about dragons in the 2nd century after Christ? Now, here you got these modern scholars saying, you know, nobody's ever seen a dinosaur because they lived millions of years ago. Well, how did they depict them on their pottery then? St. George is famous for slaying a dragon in 275 A.D. He was later martyred for his faith. He's the patron saint of England and Portugal. St. George and the dragon. This would have been in the first couple centuries after Christ. If you ever tried to read the old Beowulf story, I've got the story in my library there. Old English Beowulf is extremely difficult to read. I mean, you can only understand a few of the words, okay? Because English has changed so much since 583 A.D. But the Beowulf story is interesting. I've read it several times. He killed Grendel the dragon by pulling off his arm. The story says Beowulf grabbed Grendel the dragon and pulled off one of his arms, and the creature fled out of the room and then later bled to death. Well, most anybody that studies a T-Rex will tell you, even though he had ferocious head and ferocious teeth and was, you know, huge, his front arms are pretty tiny. And if you could ever get a hold of one, you probably could jerk it right off. They found an ancient Babylonian cylinder seal. This is from the book by Bill Cooper, After the Flood, a tremendous book. He traces the history of what happened to Noah's 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Where did their kids go? You know? And has found some amazing records, done great research. Now, Bill Cooper is a very sick man. He lives in England, but he's, I believe, dying of cancer. Last report I got. But this picture is from his book about a Babylonian cylinder seal. Would have been about 600 BC. Again, it shows a man pulling the arm off of a dragon. What a way to fight a dragon. Grab his arms. Pictures from all over the world, ancient legends, ancient pottery, shows dinosaurs on it. Here's from the book The Ancient Near East in Pictures. Shows a picture of 2 long-necked animals. I would say a dinosaur they're trying to depict here without much question. This another piece of ancient pottery shows 2 long-necked dragons, and they're holding a sheep. Now, if dinosaurs lived millions of years ago, like the textbook says, how did these people know to depict them on their pottery? Here's a hippo tusk made of ivory that was carved to be a magic wand or whatever for an Egyptian grave, found from a 12th century BC tomb. 1,200 years before Christ, it's even before King Solomon, shows an animal with a long neck and a long tail. Now, giraffe has a long neck, does not have a long tail. The only animal I know that has a long neck and a long tail is a dinosaur. There are stories and legends from countries all over the world. Every place I travel, I see stuff like this, so I grab my camera and get a picture, you know. Thai seafood restaurant showing the head of a dragon on their boat. Now, why would they build boats with dragon heads on them? There's a Russian medallion showing a man slaying a dragon. A Bulgarian postage stamp has a guy slaying a dragon. Irish writer in 900 AD reported that somebody killed a dragon with iron nails on its tail. Probably the Stegosaurus, of course, though several dinosaurs had these big spikes on their tail. There are several websites about dragons. None of them that I'm aware of. I didn't read through all of them, but they're all secular. They're not at all Christian that I could see. But they do keep interesting articles about dragon stories from ancient literature. So if you want to get into the study of dragons, it's really pretty interesting to see all about the dragons. The Viking ships had these dragon heads on them. If you study Scandinavian literature, you can see the dragon head on this one. Ancient Scandinavian literature has an awful lot of stories about the kraken or the giant dragons of the sea. Well, you figure that the Vikings are the guys that are going around the ocean in their boats, you know, conquering villages. Where's the hardest place to exterminate an animal totally? In the water, yeah. Especially the ocean. On land, you could eventually corner it. figure out some way to get it, but on the ocean you'd have a tough time. And so there are this is from 1000 AD. Here we have evidence of dragons living with man just 1,000 years ago. In the book called The Unexplained, there's information about this. There's also an account of a dragon called Nithhagar that the Vikings was killed in the book After the Flood by Bill Cooper. According to the Norse legend, Siegfried slew the dragon Fafnir. The dragon had made its home in a cave, and somebody else had buried a treasure in that cave. I'm sure the dragon didn't know that and didn't care, but people wanted the treasure, of course, so you got to kill the dragon to get to it. There are several different stories about how Siegfried slew the dragon. Of course, legends get twisted with time. One story says he dug a pit because they knew the only soft part of the dragon was his belly. So he dug a pit and laid in this pit until the dragon went over him, and then he jabbed his sword up into the dragon's belly. That's one story. Another one is he just charged up there and just stabbed it in the heart. Who knows how it really happened. But Carl Schuker is a scientist in England, has a great book called Dragons, A Natural History. I've got it in my library. Just story after story of people slaying dragons down through history. Marco Polo reported in his memoirs, when he came back from China, he said, the emperor in China raises dragons to pull chariots in his parades. Ceremonial dragons. Well, all you have to do is go to any Chinese restaurant, and you'll see dragons all over the place. It's just a part of their culture. Over in China, you probably saw them all over, didn't you?
Well, they have a different connotation than they do in the West. You see, they represent the king. They're very positive. In the West, they're bad.
In China, the dragon represents the king, and it's very good. Interesting. Well, why on earth would Marco Polo come back and say the emperor is raising dragons to pull chariots in his parades? I think it's probably because the emperor was raising dragons to pull chariots in his parades. Marco Polo was an extremely famous man. Well, he wouldn't want to do something dumb and jeopardize his reputation, I don't think, anyway. A city in France was renamed Nurlug in honor of the man who slew the dragon in the city. I think if we actually could get an unperverted view of history, we would see there's an awful lot of legends that are based on some kind of real story. If you go to the Grand Canyon, you will find carvings on the walls of the Grand Canyon. The Indians did this all over. They call them pictograph, including a picture of a dinosaur. If you look at dinosaurs, many of them had the upright posture, we call that. They walk on two legs, and the front two legs, we assume, were, held up off the ground, similar to an ostrich, I guess, upright posture. Though there are some animals like frogs that walk on four legs. The front two are real tiny, the back two are really big. So the size of the leg doesn't mean he didn't walk on it, necessarily. But why would they carve dragons on the walls of the Grand Canyon? Here's another one with a round body, four legs, long neck, long tail. Dr. Delancey was a dentist in Pennsylvania who took these pictures. His wife, Margaret Delancey, his widow, she lives in Percy, Pennsylvania. Right? I've preached up in that city 4 or 5 times, right near there, Sellersville, and up just north of Philadelphia. That's south. You're from Allentown, though, right? Up south of Scranton. Yeah. He's the one who took these pictures, and she let me use these. In the Aboriginal caves in Australia, there are many legends of dragons from caves in Australia. This was just sent to me, Agawa Rock Art, from, however you pronounce that, Lake Superior Provincial Park, Ontario, Canada. Notice the outline of the dragon with the bumps on his back. This is called cliff art, rock art. There's another name for this. Some people call it oop art. That'd be a good quiz question. OOP means out of place. Out of place artifacts. So they get the name oop art. That's just a slogan that people use. So if you find something that shouldn't be there, if you're digging down in the ground and you're down in area where it should be from, 500 years ago from some Indian civilization, and you find an Evinrude outboard motor, that would be an out-of-place artifact, right? That shouldn't be there. So oop art is out-of-place artifacts, things that really shouldn't be there. This type of stuff is by the evolutionist. A person who believes in evolution often will classify this kind of material as we don't understand it, it's an enigma, you know, forget it. I've got whole books of these enigmas that they can't explain. Down in Lima, Peru, if you go south about 8 hours drive through the mountains, you come to the city of Ica. Ica, Peru is right near the desert that is the driest desert in the world. My understanding is it's only rained once there in 400 years. Not a good place for a garden. But the Spanish came through this area about 400 years ago, in the late 1500s. They came through and they saw these strange white lines. Not very wide, but there were these white lines, just somebody scratched like a plow on a field. Perfectly straight lines, you know, for a long ways. Nobody knew what they were until airplanes were invented. When you get way up in the sky, you notice these are pictures of giant images. You ever heard of those before? The Nazca Desert lines, you know? They have, you know, spiders and hummingbirds, and I mean, 4 or 5 miles long. Sometimes they go right, you come to a mountain, it stops, you go on the other side of the mountain, and it takes off in an exact straight line. So these guys really knew something about surveying and mathematics to be able to do this. Or, there's another reasonable theory, I think. They had flight. They knew how to fly. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Here's people after the flood living to be 400 years. You could learn a lot in 400 years. People before the flood are 900 years old. You could really learn a lot in 900 years. Plus, you can go talk to your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather because he's still alive. You can get all this. The wisdom would be incredible, the knowledge that was preserved. In the Smithsonian, they have, and I'll show you when I get to video number 7, our question-answer, we've got a whole section on, was ancient man primitive? We have a book, as a matter of fact, on that topic here that we sell. Or we do sell the book After the Flood by Bill Cooper. I forgot about that. We just started carrying that. The Puzzle of Ancient Man is a great book, which shows, for instance, pictures of things that are found in graves that just shouldn't be there. Like a grave in South America, they found an airplane. This grave was at least 1,000 years old. An airplane, a little toy airplane. So Smithsonian has it, and they have it labeled as a stylized insect. Tell me that's a stylized insect. In 1571, the Spanish reported finding stones with strange animals carved on them. Now, who remembers roughly when were dinosaurs rediscovered in modern times? The first one was reassembled, the bones put together when? 1809. 1571. By 1571, most dinosaurs were extinct, been killed off by man. They had not been rediscovered yet to put them together in museums. So we have a several hundred-year time lag in here where nobody knew about dinosaurs. Never heard of them. Never saw one. But the Spanish said these stones had strange animals carved on them. They didn't know what they were. They just reported it. You know, we went across this desert and found strange carvings. Today they are known as the Nazca burial stones from the Nazca Desert. They were probably built about the time of Christ, roughly 500 BC to 500 AD. These stones are a little smaller than a football, though they range from, you know, golf ball size to the size of a lazy boy chair. The average is about the size of a football or less. Here's Dr. Decara, a medical doctor from Lima, Peru, who collects the stones. He has 11,000 of them in his collection. These stones have dinosaurs on them. Now, it's interesting, if you really study this topic, and I read Dr. Decara's book, and I know several folks who've been down there many times to study this. I could get one of the stones for $2,000 if I want to spend $2,000 on one, get one of these little Ica stones. I've held them in my hand. It's just an amazing story about these stones. This one, for instance, over 50,000 have been found in Ica. This one shows a Triceratops. Behind him is a Stegosaurus. In front of him is an Ankylosaurus, probably. Off to the left is an Apatosaurus, long neck, and a T-Rex of some kind. Notice on the sides of this one, you see the circles in the skin? Keep that thought in mind. Here's a guy hitting one on the head with something. Dr. Baugh is a friend of mine from Glen Rose, Texas. He has 2 of the stones. If you're driving across and stop at the museum, you can see his Ica stones that he has there. He went down there and was able, because he's a museum, they do a museum-to-museum transfer. You're not allowed to sell Peruvian treasures, or you'll be you go to jail. Now, because of this, the people who are finding these stones have to be very careful what they do. Don Patton lives in Garland, Texas. He has one of the stones. You can see some good pictures on him on the website bible.ca, which stands for Canada. /tracks is the... Now, I don't agree with some of the stuff on bible.ca. They do have a lot of interesting material on there, on this website. Anton Willett is a friend of mine from Canada. He speaks French. He went, and Spanish and English. He went down there and spent 8 months studying the Ica stones. He gave me the book about the Ica stones that I have, and the pictures that he took of these Ica stones. There's his phone number if you want to call him up, 450-359-4405. Dennis Swift is a pastor in Oregon. I preached at his church, at a large Nazarene church there in Beaverton, Oregon. Has about 2,500 people. He collects the stones also. Goes down there twice a year to study this topic and brings back the stones if he can. Here's, again, notice the circles on the side of the dinosaur. Kind of strange. Here's Dennis Swift holding one with a triceratops on it. The carvings in these stones are pretty amazing. They all have a coating on them that comes with time. It's called oxidation. Almost all materials, or many materials, if they're exposed to the air, they oxidize. You know, your car starts off bright, shiny paint. After 10 years, if you don't do anything, it'll oxidize and the paint fades. The oxygen actually, gets into the paint and oxidizes it. Well, that's what happens to these stones also. So they analyzed these stones and said that the coating on there, the oxidized coating, would require several hundred years to accumulate that much. So if somebody comes along and says, well, these stones are fake, somebody made them last week, we have several things to prove that that is not true. Number one, the oxidized coating on there says they're at least several hundred years old. Number two, the Spanish reported them 400 years ago, before dinosaurs were even a popular idea. Number three, this circle on the side is interesting. Now, dinosaur bones have been found for the last few hundred years and reassembled. Nobody had ever found dinosaur skin. Dinosaur skin would not fossilize very easily. A few times, skin impressions were found where apparently the dinosaur fell down in the mud. He rotted away, but the mud hardened, and it left behind an impression of his skin, and you can see they did have scales. In 1992, I believe, a Bolivian missionary found fossilized dinosaur skin. This is from Dr. Baugh's museum. Again, on the dinosaur on the left, you can notice the circles on the side. They've discovered now that dinosaur skin has Rosetta patterns, they're called, circles. Now, if the skin wasn't discovered till 1992, but the stones were discovered in 1940s, basically. The Spanish knew about them, but in 1946, they really became popular. People started going after these things. How would they know to put the circles on the side if you're carving them? You would not know to put those circles on the side of the dinosaur because you didn't know dinosaurs had circles in their skin because no skin had ever been found until 1992. Interesting. Now, because it is illegal to sell Peruvian treasure, they sent, because of this, all the information about these stones, somebody, I think it was NOVA or some science program, sent somebody down there to Peru to investigate. They got down there and they got this, one of the farmers who has produced most of the stones, and he won't tell anybody where he gets them because he's out robbing these graves. That's what he's doing, these old graves. And he sells these stones to tourists or to Dr. DeCara, who buys as many as he can afford. They got this guy on camera and asked him, where do you get these stones? Now understand, if you are getting Peruvian treasures, ancient artifacts, and selling them, you go to jail. They say in Peru, a jail sentence is like a death sentence. Because they're just, you think Mexican jails are bad. They say Peruvian jails are the worst there are. For one thing, they throw you in jail and lock you up. They don't feed you, they don't entertain you, they do nothing for you. If your family on the outside doesn't bring you some food, you will starve to death. Average life expectancy in a Peruvian jail is about 2 years, is what I've been told. So, Here's the camera videotaping this Mexican farm, or this Peruvian farmer, and they're asking him the question, where do you get these stones? Right behind the camera are two Peruvian police officers. In case he says, I'm digging them up out of a grave and I'm selling them, he's going to go to jail. So the guy stands there in front of the camera and says, oh, I make these stones. It's a hobby of mine. So they gave him one of the stones that had no markings on it, gave him the same kind of rock, and said, here, make one for us. So he carved one out with a scratched the surface like that, and it was lousy. Nothing similar at all to what he had here. But the scientists came home and said, see, they're saying their dinosaurs lived with humans. You know, we know it's not true. This Peruvian farmer's making these things. It's all a big hoax. And that story is still reported today among the evolutionist circles because they got this one report where somebody went down there and investigated it. Well, it was just simply silly the way that was done. They have the oxidized coating. They had circles in the skin. They can't make them like this. Nobody's been able to now anyway. The simple fact is they're trying to cover up for the obvious. They don't want to admit that maybe man and dinosaurs lived together. Dennis Swift here is holding one. Again, you see the circles on the side of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, probably. Here's a guy cutting the head off of one. Obviously, I would think a dinosaur-like creature. Here's a guy riding one. Some have suggested that maybe dinosaurs were used to help build some of the giant buildings, like the Great Pyramid, or the huge stones found up in Peru in the mountains that weigh 20,000 tons. Well, the biggest crane on Earth today can only lift 3,000 tons. There's a picture in there of a 100-ton rock in that book, The Puzzle of Ancient Man. These are up on the top of mountains. And they're cut and they fit together with part of a wall. How do you move a 100-ton stone? Well, some have suggested maybe dinosaurs were involved. In a city called Acámbaro, Mexico, if you look at Mexico City on a map and go west about an hour, you come to the city of Acámbaro. John Turney, I've talked to him on the phone, never met him yet, he's in Connecticut. He's been there many times to study the similar stones that are found in Acámbaro, Mexico. Down there, this stones with dinosaurs and humans on them, it's kind of a cult. They're guarded. It's kind of a secret. They don't want people knowing about this. But at least 56,000 of these stones have been found, and they're locked away in a big museum. John Turney's been in to see them and photographed them. Again, you find dinosaurs and humans together in Acámbaro, Mexico. Now, first place, who on earth would sit around and carve 56,000 stones? Why? If you're just going to lock them up in a museum. What's your motive? I think we have evidence, very strong evidence, of man and dinosaurs living together. In 1572, an Italian peasant killed a dragon. The story goes that he was walking his cows, the small dragon came out and hissed at his cows and scared them, so he smacked it on the head and broke its neck, killed the dragon. They got the local guy in town who was interested in scientific type stuff, a local scientist named Ulysses Aldrovandus, an Italian scientist, who got the dead body of this dragon and had it stuffed and mounted for a museum display. It wasn't the bones, it was the skin, stuffed by a taxidermist in 1572.